Welcome to Cultural Adjustment Part 2. It's important that you watch the introduction and Part 1 before starting this portion of the video. At this place, we will start an activity, and I will explain the activity, and then you'll have time to work on it by pausing the video. You will be needing the skills important for adjusting to different culture handout. And your group or you individually can decide how you want to do this. If you're in a group, you can make a line and count off by numbers of people, 1 or 1, 2, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and have all the ones get in a group and all the twos get in a group. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a look at the list of skills important for adjusting. For example, it says tolerance for ambiguity, low goal task orientation, open-mindedness, non-judgmental, empathy, communicativeness, flexibility, adaptability, curiosity, sense of humor, warmth in human relationships, motivation, self-reliance, strong sense of self, tolerance for differences, perceptiveness, and ability to fail. All these skills are needed to adapt to a different culture. But what the point of getting in your groups is to sit in your group and discuss what do you think the top 3, the most important 3 skills are in order to adapt to a different culture. So I'm going to give you time to pause the video and then you will come back after for the rest. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So hopefully you have completed the list and decided which 3 skills you felt were most important in adjusting to a culture. But I think that you will be surprised by what the top 3 are. And usually when I do this with groups, it's just fun to watch them talking about different things and the conclusions they come. So I hope you talked and you didn't work all independently in your group. I hope that you talked to one another in your group. So the top number 1 skill for dealing with another culture or adapting is, survey says, number 1, sense of humor. Number 1, sense of humor. The number 2 skill for adjusting, important for adjusting to a different culture is, survey says, ability to fail. Number 2, ability to fail. The third most important skill for adjusting to a different culture is, survey says, low goal task orientation. Low goal task orientation. So on your handout, you had an area to put your 3 guesses, and now you have an area right under that to put the 3 most important skills. Sense of humor, ability to fail, and low goal task orientation. Why? Adapting to a new culture is like learning to walk. Babies moving to toddler stage who learn to walk, they stumble, they fall, they get hurt, etc. But why is this okay? Number 1, it's expected. It's expected that a baby learning how to walk is going to stumble, fall, and get hurt. And number 2, they keep trying again. Okay, so we know that they're not going to give up trying to walk just because they stumble, fall, or get hurt. So even going in and out of North American culture is a transition. When people go back for furlough, or you go back to your home country in between things, or you move to a new place and you're dealing with this, these are going to be the top 3 things in having to adjust to a different culture. So let's think about these 3 in relation to moving in and out of cultures, because sometimes people for business are going back and forth, or you go to serve in a different country and then you have to go back to your home country. So what does that mean? So as you go in and out of cultures, this is what you must be able to do, to laugh at yourself. So the sense of humor is talking about you have to have the ability, the skill of being able to laugh at yourself. Or to laugh, 1 at yourself, 2 at a circumstance, and 3 not to take things so seriously. If you want to adjust to a different culture, then you're going to have to develop a sense of humor. As you go in and out of cultures, if you want to adjust well, you must be able to get up and try again. So that's where the ability to fail comes in. Now, we tend to have a misconception that when we make a mistake, that equals failure. But failure can only occur when you don't try again. So like a little kid, get up and try again. You know that there's cultural value differences. You know you're going to mess up one day and you're going to get it another day, and it's okay. When you're learning how to adapt and adjust, you're going to have these times. So give yourself the ability to fail. And third, when you're going in and out of cultures or living somewhere, you have to set low goals. I know that as soon as we see the word low, we think that's a negative thing. Obviously, that can't be a skill. And then when you see low goal task, I mean, you're talking about, for a North American, somebody who's very high task oriented, and you're saying, hey, you need to have a low goal task orientation. Why? Because you need to know that things take time. Things take time to learn, it takes time to adapt, and you need to set realistic expectations on yourself. When we now in God, we can set our expectations over the limit. We can expect Him to work through His Word and His power and what He's promised us. We can expect that. We expect high in Him. But to put expectations on ourselves that aren't appropriate or we can't do, and that God's not even asking us to do, that is what keeps us from being able to adjust to a new culture. If we will lower our goal task orientation, then we will be able to adjust to a different culture a whole lot easier. So remember, you need sense of humor, ability to fail, and a low goal task orientation. So in order to adapt, your behavior has to change. When, not if, you do the wrong thing, meaning you upset a cultural value by your response, so remember you're being judged by your response and behavior to that cultural value, you might get an undesirable reaction from somebody. Somebody in the culture that you're trying to love, you're trying to serve, and you upset the cultural value, and now you get this negative response. So don't allow anger at yourself for messing up, anger at what you're feeling, anger at somebody else, anger at a situation, or starting to get angry at the whole entire culture, bring you into isolation. So recognize what is happening, what you're feeling, and put away that anger. When God calls you, He will help you. So most of us in this stage of adaptation believe it's not going to happen to us. So I don't know at what point you're watching this video, if you're new into the culture and you're still excited, or if you've hit some of those angry and frustrating times, if you're ready to flee and run away, or if you've learned to appreciate certain things. I don't know where you are, but a lot of people think it's not going to happen to me. But the truth is that most of us go through a time of psychological discomfort. Some teachers and missionaries often set these unrealistic expectations of themselves. And if you expect not to have any problems because you studied this, you took it in college, you know Latin people, you are a Latin or you are North American and you should know this, then what happens is you tend to become very disappointed in yourself. When you become disappointed in yourself, you begin to think there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. And then sometimes it goes to even the extreme where you begin to condemn yourself. This is a very destructive cycle. Very destructive. Some have such a hard time, they end up sitting in a room and staring at a wall. It actually happens. And the type of reaction to culture shock can be similar to the loss of a family member and to post-traumatic syndrome, where the person goes in shock and doesn't do anything. So the worst thing that you can say to yourself is, there's something wrong with me. The worst thing you can say is, there's something wrong with me. I want to tell you, there is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. So it's kind of like when you're going to the doctor and you're going to have a shot or have some painful procedure done to you, and you're taken by surprise. You didn't know that you were going to get that shot that day or that was going to happen that day. So it's much worse to deal with it because you had no warning. But if you know what to expect, and if you're told this will hurt some, this is what we're going to do, this is going to hurt a little bit, you will do a lot better. So what we're going to do is start to explain culture shock, or what to expect from culture shock, and then you will do better, moving from adjusting to appreciation. So what are we talking about here? And this, we're going to do the second half of the page where it says, how does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? This is on emotions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read this basketball scenario to you. And you're going to be in the same groups that you were in before. And as I read it, do not write anything down. You're going to put yourself in the situation and help your group make a list of emotions that you would feel if you were in the same circumstances in this scenario. And we're going to see who can make the longest list in the shortest amount of time. So for the group leader or whoever, they're going to make sure they're sitting in the same groups. I'm going to read the scenario, and then you're going to press pause, and everybody's going to write what emotions, how that would make them feel in that scenario, and then you're going to press the tape back on again. So here is the scenario on the handout. You are invited to play basketball, and since you used to play basketball in high school and college, you say, sure, I'll play. You notice there's lots of spectators and lots of excitement. Early in the game, you notice a player running across the court holding the ball. You look at the referee expecting him to foul him on that, but he doesn't do anything. You notice that nobody but you is concerned about that. He shoots for the basket, misses, and you get the ball. As you start for your basket, someone comes from behind and tackles you as though you were playing American football. Now, you're sure he'll get called on that one, but he's not called on it. And then you become aware that the crowd is cheering for the tackler. You express your feelings about what is going on, and everybody looks at it as though there's something wrong with you. So you're going to get in your groups, and then you're going to have a minute or a short amount of time to see how many emotions, how does that make you feel, and how many emotions can you write? 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, so after the activity, what you're supposed to do is count up all your emotions and have each group share the answer to how did that make you feel. When you've answered that and had each group answer, then turn the video back on. Okay, so when this kind of a game that you used to understand, basketball, is put in a different situation and all of a sudden the rules are different, lots of different emotions occur. So I'm sure some did anger, surprise, bewilderment, confusion, frustration, hurt, anxiety, disorientation, dependence, discomfort, stress, a desire to escape, determination to never be in this situation again. So the rules have changed, and that's what's happening with cultural adjustment. It's a different game, and there's different goals, there's different values. So by going through the different values that Latin American and North American cultures have, that is like a key, or that is like your set of rules, are the differences. But culture is pervasive, so there's no way you can learn all the new rules in one day. So it's something that you continually learn, or continually notice and have conflict with. So what do we mean when we're talking about culture shock? Please take the handout that says the definitions of culture shock, We're going to start going over this culture shock with the different questions that are on there of definitions and views of it and what causes are from it. So the very first thing on there, and you can just take notes, are definitions of culture shock. So one definition is by the Peace Corps, and they define culture shock as our reaction to our values being questioned. The Peace Corps says, our reaction to our values being questioned. The dictionary definition for culture shock is the psychological disorientation most people experience when they move for an extended period of time into a culture markedly different than their own. So the person of true culture shock behaves much in the same way that a person does recovering from the shock of any trauma. Dave Pollock's definition, and he was a man who wrote many books on third culture kids. That's children that don't grow up in their parents' home country and they're not really part of their foreign country, and so they are third culture. You ask them where home is and they don't know where home is. Because they didn't grow up in North America and they grew up in Latin America, but they're not Latin American. And so that creates this third culture kid. His definition is the creeping anxiety that begins to move in and around a person as they begin to discover that the situation in which they find themselves is sending out signals that don't mean the same as the signals that their own culture has sent. So they have a sense that they are not sure they know how things work and are not sure what they want to know sometimes. So it's our reaction to being cut off from our customary social cues. So the experience is cumulative, meaning that it adds up, experience and cultural difference upon another, and it's pervasive, that it just doesn't let up. So it's not like you get a break when you're dealing with other cultures or living in another culture. It's cumulative, it keeps adding up, and it's pervasive. It doesn't give up. So the medical definition is, for culture shock, debilitation and exhaustion of the neurological system and especially of the endocrine system due to overstimulation. And my definition that I used to put as part of the Runaway Seminar, or answering the call, or casting vision mapping for personal and ministry, is that culture shock is not the things. So culture shock is what's happening to us when we are being pressed by different circumstances or things. Now those things happen to be language barrier, foods, not being able to flush the toilet paper, no electricity, having it take hours to run errands, the traffic, the road construction, the paperwork for residency, different things you're going through. Then you're dealing with direct and indirect communication and all that. Culture shock is not those things. Because if it were things, then you start to put your blame on things. Culture shock is what is happening to us when we are oppressed by those different things, the different circumstances. What is going on the inside? That is really what culture shock is. Number 2 on your handout is, what are the views of culture shock? You know, they can be considered part of the definitions, but just what are some of the views on culture shock? A is that it's a temporary mental illness. A temporary mental illness. That means that it's characterized at times by anxiety, disorientation, paranoia, and depression. B, it's the prelude to adjustment. So that means it's the kind of thing that happens before you finally begin to fit in. And this could be characterized by being bewildered, confused, defensive, lonely, or regressive. C, it's the learning process. So as you move into a new situation and not knowing what is present, what you must learn, how to act, you have an experience interacting with somebody, you react inappropriately in the culture and you get a certain response. And then when you reflect on that, you decide that's not the way you want to react. You begin to conceptualize what happened. Why did I get that response that I got? And you observe behaviors of others and the response that they're eliciting. And then the next time the situation repeats itself, you try a different behavior and get a different response. So the situation repeats itself, but you're going to try a different response to that situation, and then you begin to change your behavior. Now you get a more positive response, and the new way of responding becomes a habit. That's how you change your behavior, and you become comfortable in the new cultural setting. You grow. This can be a positive view, and what it ignores is that the process can be very painful. So even though the learning process is a view of culture shock, it kind of ignores the fact that it might be the whole process of learning and having to go through those feelings and readjust how you're responding or behaving can be a very painful process. 3 on your handout is the causes of cultural shock and the frustrations it causes. So causes and related frustrations. One is causes of medical symptoms. So remember that the medical definition was rehabilitation and exhaustion from a neurological system, and especially the endocrine system, due to overstimulation. So the overstimulation is caused by excess environmental novelty. So we're cut off from the cultural cues and known patterns which we're familiar with from our own culture, especially the subtle, indirect ways we normally have and express feelings. Another cause, or something that culture shock causes, is this situation we find ourselves in of having to make decisions based on inadequate information. So it causes this place of having to make decisions based on inadequate information. So for example, what time are we really supposed to arrive? Or we go to the market and the lady says, "Quiere naranjas piña or naranjas para jugo?" Like, do you want oranges, pineapple oranges or oranges for juice or whatever? And you're like, oh my gosh, I only knew the word for orange, and now I have all these choices to make, and I have to make a decision based on inadequate information because I don't know what is what. I don't know what they're talking about. In some questions, the big question is, where are we supposed to go to the bathroom? So it can be as discomforting as that. We're out in the middle of nowhere, like, where are we supposed to use the bathroom? Another thing that happens, a cause that happens from cultural adjustment, is that we have a mismatch between our expectations and reality, or the other way around. I don't know. They just don't match. They don't meet. So there's a mismatch between our goals and what we can actually accomplish. And so this can cause a lot of frustration. This is especially true with missionaries. So there are expectations of the country when you come in here. There's expectations from the people that send us to the country. There's expectations that we put on ourselves. There's expectations of the people that we're working with. Sometimes the expectations come from others. We feel that we're expected to function with maximum skill and speed, but the rules have not been adequately explained. So we're not really sure on how we're supposed to do that, especially when we've made such a sacrifice. We feel like we've made such a sacrifice to be here, and we want to see some results from our decisions. I mean, we want to see some results from our goals and our tasks and our expectations, and there seems to be this mismatch of what we expect and what we can actually accomplish when we're here. So it's kind of like the oxygen mask on a plane when the flight attendant's going through all of the what to do in case of an emergency, and she says, when the oxygen mask comes down, put it on yourself first, then turn to help your child put it on. And the reason why they do that is because they don't want you to pass out while you're helping your child. Because if you go to put the mask on the child first and you don't even get that done, then both of you are going to be hurting. And so we have to be realistic about what we can do in the country, how we can help, and first be taking care of ourselves and helping ourselves to go through all these emotions, then turning and trying to help somebody else. Don't try to help other people in that country or even your own family before you have helped yourself dealing with all these emotions and helped yourself with dealing with culture shock. Another thing that culture shock causes is living with ambiguity. So we're like, what's going to happen? What's going on? What is expected of me? What's going to happen to me? And you'll find that with when teams come, you might have adjusted and then a team comes in and they're like, what's next? What are we doing tomorrow? What is going to happen? What are we going to do? And it's kind of that living with ambiguity. Well, we planned on doing this, but everything is subject to change. We have to be flexible. Another thing that happens with culture shock is it creates limitations. So we can, all of a sudden, things we could do in our home country, as far as being able to communicate and work and flow because we had the same cultural values, all of a sudden we feel limited. Like, I'm limited by language, I'm limited by transportation, I can't get around, I'm limited by obtaining things that I need to get, like I need to be in the classroom, but I can't find this to work with. Loss of routines and comforts. And so there's all sorts of these frustrations and things that can happen that make us feel like a result or culture shock kind of causes these limitations on us. Number 4 on your handout is the results of culture shock. The results. What kind of results happen according to culture shock? What's going on with me physically and emotionally? So A is the physical symptoms. Physical symptoms. And these can be fatigue and higher susceptibility to disease. So a person in cultural adjustment stress has less than normal white white blood cells to fight disease. So because the stress causes your immune system to go down, you're more susceptible to disease. And it's not just the different things in the food and the water. It's that your body has less blood cells to fight it. The second thing is the emotional symptoms. The emotional symptoms. This could be anxiety, dependence, confusion, stress, aggression, hyper-irritability or anger, bitterness, resentment, homesickness, depression, disorientation, low self-esteem, boredom due to like an emotional freeze-over. Sometimes those close to us will kind of misinterpret the emotional flatness and will take it personally. So once there was this teacher that used to be funny and outgoing, and then the culture shock hits them, and all of a sudden the students are saying, teacher, you're not funny anymore. What happened? Like if you go from being really outgoing and funny, and then all of a sudden you're just flat and cold. So there can be the sense of that going on. There can be a sense of incompetence or impotence, and the limitations we mentioned can cause us to feel at the functioning level like a 2-year-old. So it's very common for people to be in the midst of a cross-cultural move to express this type of idea, that they feel like a little kid, that there are no good reasons that I'm feeling this way. A 2-year-old doesn't even have the language yet to be able to verbalize what their needs are. And he can play next to a child, he can observe a child, but the difference between us and a real 2-year-old is no one expects the 2-year-old to function like an adult. So here we are, we're going through a lot of the same things that a 2-year-old's going to. We don't know how to express the culture shock. People back home or wherever don't understand what we're going through. They think you're an adult, just get over it. And so they're not giving us that time to really deal with things we need to deal with, or emotions, or self-reflect, and we don't have the words to tell them, I'm frustrated and my conflict is between direct and indirect communication today, or I'm frustrated, I'm having problems with task versus relationship, and we don't have the words yet. So hopefully we've given you a lot of words today to be able to use to say, that's where my frustration is. Sometimes it's going to be, I don't know, I messed up today, I got the wrong response, I fell down, and I can't explain it. And that's what's going on. So we have these physical symptoms, we have these emotional symptoms that come as a result of culture shock. Next, the last, on the end of our page, we have the stages of culture shock. The stages of culture shock. So what we're going to do is actually, I have a chart behind me, but you also have the cultural adjustment curve on the back of your page as well. Cultural adjustment curve. You'll notice that there is a box up above the chart and a box below the chart. It's kind of like in the middle of a table. And so there'll be things to write on the top boxes and things to write on the bottom boxes as we go through each of the stages. And although my curve on the cardboard is very smooth, the one on the handout is actually more accurate because you go up and down in the stages. It doesn't flow smoothly to each one. And so we're going to go through each of the stages of culture shock. Okay. Stage 1 is what we call the honeymoon stage. So at the top of the page, you write the word fun in the first box. And what happens is that people are excited, they're enthusiastic, everything's new, they're ready to get into the new job, the new volunteer situation, they're ready to get into the new ministry, and they are really healthy at this point. So at the bottom, some of the feelings they're feeling are excitement, enthusiasm, and newness. Everything's new. And so this is the fun stage. Fun stage. Then what happens is after a certain amount of time, what can happen is what we call flight. So you're going to write flight. And at the bottom, withdrawal. There was an example of a young couple that was new at the U.S. Embassy. The husband had lived overseas before, but the wife had not. So the honeymoon stage did not last long for her, or she might have even skipped it. When she got to the new country, on the way home from the airport, she closed her eyes the whole way home. And upon arriving in the apartment, she went into the bedroom, closed the blinds, closed and locked the door, and refused to come out. So you have this flight and this withdrawal going on. After several weeks of her husband bringing her meals to her in her bedroom, the husband concluded that it wasn't going to work as he had hoped, and they had to return to the United States. So among embassy personnel, at this stage, sometimes people feel the flight, the need to leave, to just get out of the situation, and to withdraw. Sometimes alcohol is used to aid in withdrawal. There are some behavioral changes. For example, sometimes if you bring your children to another country in a new situation, sometimes they'll regress. Maybe they were potty trained, but they'll regress to wetting the bed again. And the temptation for addiction, such as alcohol, smoking, and drugs, can be very strong. Even other addictions, over-socializing, overeating, overspending, behavior based on self-centeredness, reading one magazine right after the other. Okay, what these people are trying to do is flee or flight and withdraw from what they're feeling. And so it's important to understand that if you notice those addictions coming back or things coming back, don't think, oh my gosh, I haven't conquered that. No, you conquered that, but part of the cultural adjustment curve is that maybe those temptations will come back a little bit higher, a little bit stronger, and so you just need to recognize it and overcome and just refuse to deal with what you're feeling in that way. At this same time, in the same stage, you can also have the fight and the anger happening. And what this is this anger, hostility, and aggression. We begin to see the culture as entirely negative. And then we glorify our home culture. Well, in the States, we used to do like this. Here, we used to do this. We used to do this. But sometimes the anger turns to mockery. And the anger can be like hidden under humor. So lots of people get stuck in this stage. They could live in a different culture for 20 to 30 or 40 years and still be mockers. And they become skilled mockers. So if we want to make a good adjustment, we need to avoid those people like the plague. It is good to realize what is causing our anger, because if we're not aware of what's causing our anger, it can often be displaced and misdirected. So missionaries and others who come here with other motives, with the expectation they will serve and love and help people, have a hard time admitting sometimes that they're having difficulties with the culture, because they were here to help and they were here to love and they were here to do these, and it's hard to say, geez, I'm having a trouble with this culture. That my anger and my sarcasm and my jokes are really showing these conflicts I'm having with the values. So it can be unacceptable in our minds that we would be angry at the people of this culture, so we become angry with our spouse or our children or the principal or the head of the mission or the sending mission or our co-workers. Never the culture. So if the anger turns inward, depression results. And so this is the most destructive form of misdirected anger. So if we don't recognize this flight and withdrawal and fight and anger, it can lead to other things like depression. And you're saying, oh, I shouldn't be depressed. Why am I depressed? Look at everything wonderful that's happening around me, and I shouldn't be depressed. But maybe it's just because you don't know what to do with all that anger that you're suppressing. The third stage, so we're wanting to work our way out of flight and fight into what I call fine, being fine. And this is the tolerance stage, tolerance. And what this is we're saying this is not, when we're recognizing something in another culture. So we're saying this is not the way I would do it, but this is the way these people have chosen to do it, and it's okay. I'm fine with this. I'm fine with the difference. So back to our first example of going to the grocery store, you find out everything's in alphabetical order. It's not the way you would do it, not the way you would do it at all, but you realize, okay, that's the way they do it here. I'm fine with that difference. I can live with it. I will adapt to it. I'm not going to get upset or bothered by it, and I can go along with it to a certain extent. So one lady said, I'm going to cope, I'm going to stay. So this is where your sense of humor really needs to kick in, and we begin to see a positive side to the different cultural values. Everything around us is different. The way people respond is different, but we're able to say, I'm fine with that. The last stage is the appreciation stage. And in the appreciation stage, what we're saying is, I feel like I fit in again. Because I've learned to appreciate the cultural differences so I can fit in. Will we ever be Latin American, and will Latin Americans ever be North American? No. We're not trying to be each other, but we can find a way to fit in where we appreciate. So first, we begin to truly understand the values behind these different behaviors that we see. Then we begin to appreciate the values and perspectives behind the behavior we are observing, and we start imitating it. So in some areas, we even come to like it, like liking relationships over tasks, or liking the politeness of something, or liking being able to adapt to a situation while driving. And in certain areas, we might say to ourselves, I prefer the way that my former way of doing things. And that's okay. So for example, we may learn to like the adaptation, the changing to the environment, but we want to still at the same time stay open to new ideas and change. So that's the positive side of control and change. And at some time when we return to our home, we might miss the behavior of our second culture. And in some areas, the behavior of our other North Americans don't even seem right. So sometimes we learn to appreciate so well that when we return to North America or Latin America, the other behavior that was our normal value, our normal cultural value, doesn't seem right. So it's definitely worth it to get to the appreciation stage. It will make you more wise, more deep, more compassionate, and understanding. You will grow and be more useful, and you will be a blessing. So underneath the cultural adjustment curve, you have this section on the bottom that says, what to do to help yourself. What to do to help yourself. Okay, and so if we can read it out loud, and then I'll give a description. So you read it with me, each one out loud. So number 1, ready, together. Be aware of what is going on inside of yourself. Be aware of what is going on inside of yourself. So you need some situation where you're not obligated to pretend that you're not having a hard time if you are. Do not try to cover up your feelings, like through overeating or alcohol or excessive socializing or excessive sleep. See, when my kids were little and they were learning to communicate, I used to train them to use their words. I didn't want them to throw a fit or to grunt, so I would say repeatedly, use your words, use your words. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, can I have this please, whatever. I would tell them, use your words. And so I would give them the proper words to use. So I say to you, we have the tools and the words, the value differences. So recognize what's going on you and use your words. I'm struggling with control versus adaptation. I'm struggling with definite and indefinite time. Number 2, let's read together. Have realistic expectations of yourself emotionally. Number 2, have realistic expectations of yourself emotionally. What does this mean? Reject the idea that people with cultural adjustment problems have something wrong with them. These difficulties happen to the best of us. So there's nothing wrong with you. Number 3, cultivate a sense of humor. Number 3, cultivate a sense of humor. So we need the ability to be able to laugh at ourselves, laugh at the situation. One time I went shopping with my daughter and I was in my husband's car, and normally I take the truck and the mirrors are a lot higher. And I was there was road construction, everybody was so close, and all the time everybody drives close, so I thought, well, this is just normal. So I try to follow this police car around thinking that I'm going to get on the highway, and it turns out it just ends up being a side road that comes back into the main road, so I have to end up merging back in. Well, all of a sudden, my side view mirror on the right, bam, gets ripped off, and I think I hit this white truck, and now my side view mirror is hanging off. At the same time, I'm still like driving super slow, trying to yield at this other side, and I know, this one I see, this blue truck hits and takes off my other side view mirror. So I'm in a daze. I don't have either side view mirror. I don't know what to do. I'm in a foreign country. I can't stop. The cops aren't going to do anything. I don't have insurance. I don't even know what to say to people. It's not safe. So I drive to a place where I can pull over a little bit and roll down the window, and my daughter and I are trying to put back on the side view mirrors, and she said, and I explained to her, I think I hit the parked white van, but I know the blue truck hit me. She said, no, I watched the white van pull out and take it off. So now we definitely, wasn't our fault. 2 different people took off our side view mirrors. That's how close we were, in 3 lanes, and then this was the 4th little part. And I could see how angry my daughter was getting. And I don't know what came over me. Maybe I was thinking, sense of humor, sense of humor. So all of a sudden, I start cracking up. And I said, I know this does not seem very funny now, but I said, one day we will laugh about it. So why don't we just laugh about it right now? And she was having a hard time, but I just tried to make it funny, like laugh at myself. It was my fault, laugh at me, but it wasn't my fault. It was just a situation. Let's just laugh at the situation. One day we will laugh about it. So here we are trying to drive home, and we have like a 30-minute ride on the highway. You don't really realize how much you use your side view mirrors until you don't have them. So we have our hands out there trying to hold these mirrors on. People are laughing at us. I go to the gas station because, of course, I assume that people at a gas station know something about a car because they put cars together. The guy looks at it and he's like, oh my goodness, this is going to be so expensive. You can't find these parts. It's very hard to fix. So all in all, just so that you're not wondering about the end of the story, I looked up on YouTube how to take off side view mirrors and put them back on. Showed my husband when he came home after I said sorry because it was the car he normally uses. And he was able to take it off and put them back on. We didn't have to buy any parts and we didn't have to tape it with duct tape. So everything worked out. But that moment, it's those moments where the things happen that we need a sense of humor to say, if you're going to laugh about it one day, you might as well laugh about it now, right? Okay, number 4, cultivate an ability to fail. Number 4, cultivate an ability to fail. So this is the example of babies learning to walk and they fall down a lot. So learning a new culture is going to take a lot of practice and we're not going to catch on to it right away. So giving yourself that ability to mess up and get up and try again. Number 5 is cultivate a low goal task orientation. Cultivate a low goal task orientation. So you're going to, at this point, also incorporate some of the value of learning to value relationship more than the task. Lower your expectations, what you're going to get done during the day, what you can accomplish, how quickly things are going to happen, especially in a Latin culture where change is slow. Change does not equal progress. So just be okay with that. Set your expectations high in God, but set your expectations on yourself and your goals and your tasks low. Number 6, find some mentors. Find some mentors. So find someone from your own culture who has successfully coped, but who is still in touch with how difficult it may be. So maybe a missionary, maybe there's a bunch of people you can get to, other people from your work, maybe if you all do this together and you're able to talk about it. But find those people who have lived here and have not become bitter, but have become very appreciative of the culture, able to laugh at themselves, able to fail, low goal task oriented, who can help you through this. Number 7, take care of yourself physically. Take care of yourself physically. What does this mean? Get adequate sleep, get an appropriate nutritious diet, get adequate recreation and exercise. You already know you're under this cultural shock, this curve, and so your immune system is down. So to keep that built up, you may need to make some changes regarding exercise, but make sure that you're doing something. It's not always safe everywhere. Avoid physically damaging addictions, things that can lower your immune system, make it harder to deal with things. I know that when I had little babies, if I didn't get sleep, I was just miserable. So I was so glad they got on a schedule to sleep through the night early, because for me personally, I know I need that sleep. A lot of times in ministry, a lot of times in business, a lot of times in other things, we tend to take care of ourselves last, and then we wonder why we can't keep going, can't keep running. So take care of yourself physically. Number 8, get involved in the culture. Get involved in the culture. One thing that's super important is learning the language. If you're going to be in another culture, a Latin American culture for any length of time, or even dealing with people in your own community in North America who are Latin, it's just nice to know a few phrases or something. And if you're going to be there for an extended time, definitely go to language school, definitely learn the language, even in business and everything, and learn everything you can about culture. Because this is only 6 main values and differences. There are lists and lists, even in the business community. If you want to look up business values, from culture to culture, man, there is stuff written out there. You can always be learning more things about a culture. And get involved. Sometimes you go to work for a school and you're only involved with that school community, but not really out in the community or in your neighborhood or in your town. Find other ways, other ministries, other opportunities of how you can interact with the culture. 9, look for reasons for the behavior that bothers you. Look for reasons for the behavior that bothers you. So what you're doing here is you're trying to understand. Don't take things personally. Ask, is this different perspective? Is there a different perspective or value behind the behavior that I'm seeing in this student, in this person I'm working with, in this church, in this business, in this volunteer thing, in my marriage? What is the value or different perspective behind it? And is there some element in this different perspective or value that I can appreciate? So we all know we have genders, male and female. A man's not going to become a woman and a woman's not going to become a man. But there are so many books out there written on how men can understand women and women can understand men, just like men are from Mars and women are from Venus. I mean, it's just tons of stuff out there. Why? Because even though we're not going to be each other, we need to learn how to communicate, because we're going to be in businesses and jobs and marriages where you have to deal with people of other genders. In marriage, a husband's never going to be a wife, and a wife is never going to be a husband. But there's book after book written on how to communicate. Why? Because they're two different people. They think two different ways. And so we read these books. Why? To better understand and better communicate and to apply them to our situations and what we're going through. So I think with North Americans and Latin Americans, I think sometimes there is not a thinking, North Americans don't think they're going to be Latin American. Latin Americans don't think they're going to be North American, but there is a level of believing that if I'm just there long enough, I'm going to just understand how to communicate. Like if I'm just there long enough and I study enough that I'm just one day going to wake up and I'm going to have been here long enough that I'm just going to understand how to communicate. And we're never going to be Latin American, and Latin Americans are never going to be North American, and there's always going to be places where we need to learn to communicate different, and always going to be new levels of learning to appreciate the culture. And I think we do a disservice to ourselves if we think that we're going to arrive, like because I know this, I'm just going to respond to the situation correctly. Now, there is another culture, and that is a kingdom culture. That is a Bible culture. So in reality, the more that North American culture seeks the kingdom of God, and the more that the Latin American culture seeks the kingdom of God, we should meet up one day and be on the same page. However, until that happens, since we're people and we're not perfect, until that happens, we're going to have to learn how to be patient, and we're going to have to learn how to work and understand each other. So as you go through this experience, give yourself some slack. Cut yourself some slack. Don't berate yourself. You're human. You're normal. You're not God. But God can use you to be a blessing. And it's worth it to get to the appreciation stage. It will make you more wise. It will help you to be a blessing. And in order to get to that appreciation stage, you need to go to extra effort. The extra effort of language school, or learning another language, or learning the culture, or just being able to listen to people and read people and understand where they're coming from, and added pressures, and maybe even some other things add on to their behavior that they don't even know. One thing I know is that we are never called to change people. We're not called to change a culture to make it that kingdom culture. We're not called to change somebody's value system. We're not called to change somebody's behavior. We are called to preach the gospel and to make disciples. And so God and the Word of God, relationship with Jesus, leading of the Holy Spirit, that is what is going to make the change in somebody. All we can do is love, live by example, teach and apply the Word of God to ourselves, apply these cultural values, and learn to appreciate by ourselves, even if nobody else does it. So, we can learn to understand each other, and we can learn to apply different things. Now, the last handout that we will not be doing as an activity is something I created as homework. And so what it says is this is the cultural adjustment homework. Because a lot of time we listen to stuff and we get a certain amount just from listening to it. If you listen to this video again within 24 hours, you will probably retain another 80% just by doing that. But sometimes we need to take what we heard and apply it to the next level. So what this homework says is take time to locate areas of stress and frustrations, which could be just lack of understanding. Locate the cultural value. So it's actually having you do what I said to do. Move from I don't understand to I'm fine with that. Create a strategy to adjust, and ask God what is the kingdom culture and how we can change to be more like Him, especially if that culture has a value that maybe is more Christian-like. So what I gave as an example on the homework sheet was where I lack understanding, the example in driving. What cultural value was being confronted? Control versus adaptation. I want everyone to follow the rules and stay on their own side of the road. So how do I move to appreciation? I don't agree or understand it, but I can appreciate that when I need to miss a pothole or get in another lane or pass someone, that other drivers move for me. And then cultural adjustment, how can I behave differently to adjust to the cultural value? I will learn to move over, to adapt for other drivers and not beep the horn as much or yell at other drivers from my car. So it doesn't mean that I will never beep the horn or yell at anybody, but it means that I am making an attempt to change and adjust to the culture. And so that is what the homework is for, is to take each area as it comes and figure out what it is that's happening and then develop a strategy on how you're going to learn to appreciate it. Thank you for listening to Cultural Adjustment, Part 1 and 2. And here's to adjusting and having skills to adjust to your new culture.